when I was working in this Malay village for a couple of years, I was talking to rich people and poor people, and I noticed that what they said depended on the context in which they said it. If rich people were present, poor people would say certain kinds of things, and rich people would say certain kinds of things. If I had them alone, they'd say different kinds of things. If they were together with other poor people or just together with other rich people. And so I realized in the course of my anthropological fieldwork that I was trying to put myself in different situations because I realized that I got a different story about what was happening, a different narrative from different people. And I did that enough so that I began to think that this was a way of seeing the world.
There's no question that the war people see on their television screens is sanitized. It's not as sanitized here as it is in America. With the war in America, they went through that whole thing, seeming to think that there was almost no bloodshed at all because they just don't show it.
Should media outlets show pictures of death and violence or not? I think they should, because if this is happening in Iraq, if I'm sitting in London and someone is trying to prevent me from being upset by seeing the ugly pictures of death on the streets, I will never see the reality of war.
No one who would see what we see would ever support a war again. So it's essential for governments that they shouldn't see these things.
Like most journalists who work out there, I always want to show more. If I've seen something, I want people to see it. But I've also learned that it's not always the most gruesome pictures that really convey the story.
I've believed for many years now that journalism, particularly television journalism, by its failure to show the real horror of war, has become a lethal weapon supporting governments that want to go to war.
There are two realities in Iraq, the red zone and the green zone. In the red zone, it's mayhem. That's the real Iraq. That's where people are really suffering and they're unable to continue their ordinary lives without extreme danger. And then there's the green zone.
You end up by producing a false picture. You end up by supporting government versions of events. I mean, over and over again, I've read reports by journalists who've flown in armed American helicopters into the green zone and been given interviews and flown out again to the airport. They won't drive the airport road any more than British diplomats will, and then fly off and say, you know, there's still hope in Iraq. The Prime Minister says the following.
You couldn't tell what people really thought if you put them in a situation that was saturated with power. So it began with a tiny little idea, and then the effort to see how widely it could be applied to different situations in which I hadn't done field work. And so it seemed to me to be a kind of rather straightforward truth that we all know implicitly about human relations and power that I could run with and try to apply to other situations.
Globalization is used by its champions to suggest a coming together of people of all races, of all countries, and it will relieve poverty, it will distribute wealth. What we're actually seeing is precisely the opposite processes in train, that the poor are becoming markedly poorer, while the very wealthy are becoming staggeringly wealthy.
Less than 5 miles away is the backyard of the global economy, the site of the dynamic success you don't see. This is a labour camp that's home to workers who make the clothes we buy in the high streets and shopping malls. This is the human price paid for our fashionable trainers, our smart shirts, our jeans with a tag that says, Made in Indonesia. Young people living here who make the famous brands are paid on average the equivalent of 72 pence a day, about $1.
So you don't like this globalization?
The entire it is happening now because of the globalization. Human beings have been reduced to consumers, and the world has become market.
There are hundreds of call centers in India today. They employ more than 245,000 workers. For most of those workers, the first step is something called accent neutralization.
Right, class, I want you to take out your books.
Shara Huzay is a longtime teacher at 24/7.
Remember the first day I told you that the Americans flap the t sound, it sounds like an almost d sound, and not keep it crisp and clear like the British. So I would not say Betsy bought a bit of better butter or insert a quarter in a meter, but they would say insert a quarter in a meter, or Betty bought a bit of better butter.
So I think, yes, in the short run, it is generating employment. But I think in the long run, it's creating a dependence and creating a vacuum in the kind of natural, organic fabric of our societies. There is another legitimate point of view and legitimate way of life, which has been delegitimized. People may not be living according to that industrial kind of framework.
And let the industrial economy live, no problem. But leave us alone. Don't make us want to live like you.
It's because the city has become the model of development, progress, of economic growth, of everything. So therefore you create economic conditions where, village life becomes unsustainable. It appears like over-idealizing village life because you're presenting us with an over-idealization of globalized life. There is something that is deeply wrong about the kind of globalization that we're seeing today. I think we have to see what is it that we're losing out on. And obviously that sense of loss is being felt.